What's the most important commandment that Jesus has given us? Now, those of you who were here 4 weeks ago know the answer to that. Jesus himself said, love the Lord your God with your whole heart and your whole mind and your whole strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. But there's a Lutheran theologian who was really an important figure in American history right around the middle of the last century, by the name of Reinhold Niebuhr, a very important political theologian in this country, who basically said, maybe Jesus was a little bit wrong. He said that the most important commandment that Jesus ever gave was the one that began today's gospel. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. At the very beginning of his ministry, when Jesus meets the people, he says, don't be afraid. When Jesus is walking on the water to meet his disciples in the boat that is being buffeted by a storm, he says, don't be afraid. The very first words of Jesus recorded in all the Gospels after the resurrection is, don't be afraid. And so Niebuhr said that it is that which might be the most important command that Jesus gives us. Why does he say that? He says that when we fear, we start looking for our own securities. When we fear, we start closing ourselves against one another. When we fear, the center of our concern becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until it's only us and maybe, if they're lucky, our immediate family. Don't be afraid. Now, I was really tempted to take this into a political realm, but I'm going to give up on that temptation. And maybe ask ourselves, what does it mean for us as Christians not to be afraid, to follow that commandment? In many ways, that commandment is related to what we heard 4 weeks ago. Love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. Because it's John who said that those who fear cannot love, and perfect love casts out fear. But I'd like to take that maybe one step further. Why are those who are afraid unable to love? As we consider ourselves more and more, as we see ourselves more and more buffeted, as we see the external world as more and more dangerous, it becomes impossible to go out. The best thing we could do is lock ourselves in a closet and hope the world goes away. And how do we move from fear to love? It's interesting, the Gospels never quite tell us. But I do think what we heard in today's second reading, especially that letter to the Hebrews, gives us an inkling. We do not fear, not because the world is not a dangerous place, we know it is. Not because in going out does not entail a risk, we know it does. But we can move from fear into love because there's something in the middle. And that's what the letter to the Hebrews calls faith and what I call trust. We don't move out to others because we necessarily trust them. We don't accept the world as it is because we think that the world is a wonderful and trusting place. We are able to move out of ourselves because we trust in God. Think of that gospel that we just heard. Jesus says that watch and wait. Wait for your master, and when he comes, he will gird himself. He will become the servant. He will have you recline at the table, and he will serve you. Now, come on, what master is ever going to do that for his servants? And yet, this is the God we believe in. The God who is there to serve, the God who is there to show us what love means, the God who has us recline at table and serves us. We are able to move from fear to love, not because of who we are, not because of what the world is like, but because of what we know about our God. We know that our God is loving. We know that the promises that God gives us will be fulfilled. We know that all will be well, as Julian of Norwich says, and all manner of things will be well if we have faith, if we have trust. As counterintuitive as that may seem, what we have is, thank you very much. This might have been a much more interesting homily. Thanks a lot. If we have trust, if we have faith, if we have love. And so, what Christ is calling each and every one of us to do today before we all burst into flames is to acknowledge not our own confidence in ourselves, not our own confidence necessarily in the world, not our own confidence in our political situation, but our confidence in God. And to be people who love, whatever the cost that may make. Be people who trust, whatever the cost that may make. To be people who are not afraid.